Welcome, everyone, to another YIVO Fellowship lecture. Our lecture today is the uh, YIVO Fellowship lecture in Baltic Jewish Studies. This lecture has been funded by the Abram and Fannie Gottlieb Immerman and the Abraham, Nathan, and Bertha Daskal Weinstein Memorial Fellowship in Eastern European Jewish Studies, as well as the Abraham and Rachela Melezin Memorial Fellowship and the Maria Salit-Gitelson Memorial Fellowship. Our lecturer today is Professor Jurgita Verbitskiena. Professor Verbitskiena is a professor at Vilnius University and head of the Research Center for the History of East European Jews. She also chairs the Humanities and Social Sciences Expert Committee at the Lithuanian Science Council and serves on the board of the GWZO Leibniz Institute Network in Germany. A historian by training, she graduated from Vilnius University's Faculty of History, and her research focuses on the history of Jews in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, non-Christian communities, socioeconomic history, historical demography, the Lithuanianization of Jews during the interwar period, the representation of Jewish heritage in contemporary Lithuania. Professor Verbitskiena is the founder and leading figure of the Vilnius University commemorative project, Recovering Memory. She is the recipient of the Fellowship in Baltic Studies at the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research for 2024-2025. Her lecture today is entitled Learning Lithuanian Step by Step, A Jewish Story. Please join me in welcoming Professor Jurgita Verbitskiena.
Hi, good evening or good afternoon. So we are in the different places. Thank you, Eddie, to the kind introduction. And I'm really so happy, but I cannot answer to the chat, to the people who write me in the chat in Lithuanian language from the different parts of the US. So it's really very nice. So I welcome you. Labas vakaras for all of you. And right now, I would like to share my slides and to start to talk about the topic what I planned today. So it's my plan was today just to have more options to figure out and to bring on the discussion history of Lithuanian Jewry, that it's till now it's mostly covered by the Holocaust issue. Of course, all of us know that the Holocaust, it was the most terrible fact and most terrible story in the 20th century's Lithuanian history. But generally, the Holocaust, how terrible it is, do not represent the all really very huge history of Lithuanian Jews. And today, I would like to talk on the topic that comes in the mind during my fellowship in the New York in YIVO. I have a lot of conversation with the different peoples by the different origin. Part of them was the Litvaks or the descendants of the Litvaks who comes from Lithuania sometimes, or from the Eastern Europe. And usually these people were surprised that for me it's really very normal to know several East European languages. And the usual surprise and cannot even believe that their descendants was as well multilingual. And I choose the topic that probably explain some Lithuanian Jewish relation in the interwar Lithuania, and as well brings the Lithuanian language as one Jewish-speaking Jewish languages into the general context of the Jewish history. So I have quite a short time, 45 minutes approximately, to present you all the history, how the Jews became Lithuanian speakers. And please think about your families and your own histories, and probably some of your grandparents or grandparents as well have more or less identical stories that they heard in the New York. So that it is incredible, and it's really very unusual that somebody from our family knows the Lithuanian language. It is still now it's really very small. So let's go a little bit. I try to bring as well the historical context and as well go to several specific aspects, and I'm ready to answer some questions. Just to more discuss, go too deeply to a phenomenon that you are interested, and to present the Lithuanian Jewish history as such. So I hope that you see my slides, and the slide is now changed. So I assume that it's all things is really it's going good.
Actually,
So
I apologize for interrupting. Would you mind switching to presenter view? So we have the full screen
okay.
slide.
Okay, I assume that so it's changed because I don't. Yeah, just a moment. Just a moment. Okay, I stop sharing and try to do this once again. I don't have a sharing option.
Julia?
Something happened. Yeah, right now I have it. Okay. Okay, it comes. It's okay right now?
Yeah, I get that. I guess it's fine. It's fine.
It's fine because I do the same, but so I don't know.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah. So let's go to the more or less general context of the interwar Lithuania. As all of you know that Lithuania in the 1918 established new national state. And this new national state was unusual both to the Lithuanians that usually have tradition to rule a big country and big state as the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, or to be together with the Poles in one state, so Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth till the end of the 18th century, or it's not tradition, of course, but just historical fact to be occupied by Russian Empire and to live inside in the big empire that was not so friendly to the local nations. And end of the First World War gives new opportunities to the quite a big number of European, especially Central and East European nations, and they create own national states. The Lithuania is one of them, and the Lithuanians need to find the new attitudes to the local Jews, and local Jews to need to find the new attitudes to the Lithuanians. And it's really very specific situation when these two groups that usually contact via the mediators, via other groups. So, for example, Russian authority or something like that, started to go to the direct contact and to create own specific attitudes. In the interwar Lithuania, I would like to give you a little bit data just to understand about which amount of the Jews we talk on this period and how it look like in the interwar Lithuania. I just avoid the different things on the territorial change. Let's not go too deeply to a geopolitical situation, but still in the interwar Lithuania, the Jews was the biggest or the largest national minority in the country, and Jews constituted approximately 7.6% of all population. It's without the Vilnius region. If we connect the Vilnius region, that quite a long time during the interwar period was under the Poles rules, generally it was 13% of the local population. If you go back a little bit to the Holocaust data and to the killed people data, we can generally think that it's we talk about approximately 250,000 Jewish men, women, and children who inhabited Lithuania more or less in that time. The quite specific feature and trend in the localization of the Jews in the state was that quite a big part of the Jews settled in the big cities. So that Lithuania from the interwar period don't have a lot of cities. So it was only few, but the Jewish was if it's not predominant group, but they have a really very strong position. And they talk about the Kaunas, Kovno, Šiauliai, Šavli, and Ukmergė, Vilkomir. Mostly, if you look generally on the shtetl phenomenon, that it's really very unique and really very common in East European region. Average of the Jews in each, more or less, each small town or shtetl in our ways was approximately 1/3 of the population. So that it's the Jewish part was visible in everyday life. Even I talk that the Jews concentrated in the biggest cities or the Jews like to live in the shtetls. We have several special localities where the Jews consisted of more than half inhabitants. So it's really some incredible numbers. If you look on the Kalvaria, there the Jews was approximately 70% of the general population, so it's probably more than in the contemporary Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. When we look on the Ukmergė or the Vilkomėš, quite a big city, it was 50% of inhabitants, and as well another one big city, more or less bigger city, is Kupiškis with 53% of the Jews. So you could imagine that the contact between the Jews and Lithuanians was everyday life. So it was everyday life, part of everyday life of economical activities, and it was really very difficult to avoid these real contacts. As well, in the interwar Lithuania, we have quite strong Jewish emigration. It is not so somehow too unique to the region. It was the same trends in the Eastern Europe, but this is one of the options how the Lithuanian language spread around the world. So, and approximately between the 1933 and 1339, approximately 25,000 of Jews left Lithuania, and majority of them, especially in the 30s, goes to the Palestine. Because the US and that moment have some quotas and limitations to go to the United States. And so generally they see the view, they see the historical context, and probably they can make a small conclusion here that it was not possible to avoid inside contacts. If you look on the languages, and the languages today is the main topic, and we will discuss languages from the different aspects of the history. So I just remind you and really very ask to look on my pictures, because these pictures illustrate some trends in the using of the Lithuanian language in the Jewish environment. So if you look here, it's advertisement of Chaim Frenkelio. You can see that it's used the Lithuanian form of the name, and this advertisement of a factory, really very famous factory, and the biggest factory in the country, and former's biggest factory even in the Russian Empire, based in the Šiauliai. It's leather factory, and so you can see that the Jews and the economical activities use really very easy Lithuanian language. But let's come back to the composition of the languages. I just remind you, I'm sure that you know this really very well, so that it's Yiddish as the everyday spoken home language, then the Hebrew. And if we talk about the earlier times, we usually could think that it was the only religion language, or only the liturgy or scholarly correspondence language. But if you look on the interwar period, it is the time of the Zionism, time of the modern Hebrew, and Hebrew became more popular and more common as the spoken language. If you look on the interwar Lithuanian Jewish schools, it was the two types of the schools. One school with the teaching on the Yiddish, and another group of schools with the Hebrew as the instruction languages. So it's generally in the interwar period we have plenty of people, more or less children or young people, who very well know modern Hebrew language. And of course, if you look in the different periods of the history, we can as well recognize in our region several languages that Jews usually use of course, in the different Jewish groups use different languages, so I don't like to generalize all Jewish community, but still it was Ruthenian language in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania till the 17th century. Then it comes to the Polish language when the Lithuania and Poland create one joint country, Poland-Lithuanian Commonwealth. 19th century is marked by the really very strong crucifixion process, and the Jews started to talk by the dominant or the authority language, so it's mean Russian. And the interwar period becomes to the absolutely new position that it was never seen before. It is Lithuanian-speaking Jews. So the main question today, when do the Jews begin to speak Lithuanian? And let's start to analyze directly this topic. So please look on the screen, and if you are able to know the Hebrew alphabet, please try to read what is written in the middle of the book cover. And let's make a small experiment. I am sure that you have some problems probably with the reading, and it's not corresponds to your knowledge of the language, but in the specific of the writing of this book. So one priest, Catholic priest, he was as well the Hebrew professor of Vilnius University. Jonas Chrysostomas Gintila lived in Samogitia, was quite influential priest and excellent in the Hebrew. He decided to convert Jewish youth, and he write in the Samogitian dialect, so it means that the one dialect of a Lithuanian language, catechismus for the Jewish conversation in the Hebrew characters. So what it means and how we could interpret this specific case, he done this in the middle of the 19th century. It means that in the middle of 19th century, we have Jews who spoke in the Lithuanian language, but they don't know Latin alphabet to read the text in the Latin characters. This combination of the spoken language and writing language and alphabets, it's really very important in our context, and we come back to this question later. So that it's from the middle of the 19th century, we could have a small assumption that it was a part of Jews who was able to speak even in the Samogitian language. In the beginning of the 20th century, exactly more or less in the same time that the Lithuania create an independent state, Uri Katzenellenbogen, so you could understand that it's the Jewish origin publisher, translated literary works, fictional works of several quite important Lithuanian authors into Yiddish and published in the 3 volumes of the Almanach Lite. So what it means as well, so it means that the Uri Katzenellenbogen knows really very good Lithuanian language, that he is able to translate, for example, Juozas Tumas Vaižgantas, and I saw that there are Lithuanians who are probably familiar with these authors, so it's really very difficult texts. So that it's as well, so it's from one side for us it's important that somebody of Jews started to translate and publish for the Jewish audience Lithuanian authors and Lithuanian literature, but from our side, I just to switch interpretation of this data, we could talk that it was some people who very well known the Lithuanian language. As well, the same Uri Katzenellenbogen translated Lithuanian songs, Lithuanian folk songs into Yiddish, and it was published with an introductory part in US. So yeah, so that it's really very specific thing that somebody tried to present the Lithuanian tradition to the Yiddish speaking and Yiddish reading audience. It's no doubt, of course, that just for very simple economical reasons, the people need to know language of each other. And for sure, we have a lot of evidences in the sources that the Jews talk Lithuanian. So it's probably not so broader vocabulary, but just for the everyday life, to the everyday communication, it was enough. From our side, we have as well a lot of evidences from the different group of society that quite a lot of Lithuanians spoke Yiddish as well. So that it's this how the Yiddish was popular outside the Jewish community, still not research or enough research topic, but this situation, this multilingual situation, what we have in our society, it's probably comes from the above side. So the Jews started to talk Lithuanian language. The Lithuanians know Yiddish. Let's talk about the servants in the Jewish houses, in the businesses, and so on. So it's these language situations was probably a little bit different than the when we understood each this situation today. So more probably difficult or from our side easier question, what brings to Jews the needs to learn Lithuanian language and why the Jews started to do this? And I find several options that gives arguments for me about the needs of to learn Lithuanian language. And the first argument that I found, and what it seems important for me, that this linguistic interaction never took place between the equal groups. The Lithuanians was bigger, or in our words, dominant group, and very nationally minded. If we talk especially about the society of the interwar period, and the Jews instead they constituted a largest national and religious minority. Historically, it was variety of different features that shows separation of Jews from the society of Lithuania, and of course from a political different structures. The second argument why the Jews started to learn Lithuanian language is, of course, it's more or less important for Lithuanians still now. So call it linguistic nationalism. So when knowing, so it's the possibility to use and to communicate in the Lithuanian language, usually Lithuanians understood as the, I don't know, some big compliment, yeah. So as a sign of the or marker of the identity and of loyalty to the state, that it was as well quite important. The third argument that I would like to give for you is the separateness of Jews, separation by two big groups. One group, it was so-called autonomist, and they tried to find the idea of own future in the Lithuanian state. So they have some ideas to live here, to have an integration to the society and so on. And they have another one group that was really very strongly influenced by the Zionist movement, and the Zionist movement was really very strong in Lithuania, and this group tried to make a more connection to the Palestine and to think about the ways of Aliyah. And that is the context why the Jews in Lithuania started to learn Hebrew language and to have Hebrew schools and so on. In the beginning of the Lithuanian independence, we have really very specific and interesting experiment. It could be taught like that. It was created in the Lithuanian government. It was created the so-called Ministry of Jewish Affairs. It's quite unique. only Belarusians have as well own Ministry of Belarusians affair. It's more. It was in both cases. It was more some offices who gives advisors and help to the so-called ministers without portfolio, with the limited options to operate in the Lithuanian government. But still, in the 1925, this Jewish cultural autonomy was stopped. So and state receives a partial control over Jewish school, and it's the crucial moment that changed the situation in the country. As well, if you look on what happened, and the sixth argument in that situation is that some Jews really believe in the country and really believe in the ideas of the integration, and try to find the ways how to represent the loyalty to the state, how to express the loyalty. And even it was several Jewish organizations, so non-profit organization, that have as main task to promotion of Lithuanian language between the Jews. You can see in the slide one of such organization was established in the 1930s, works 4 or 5 years. And it was organization of the Jewish Society for the promotion of Jewish promotion of studies in the Lithuanian language between the Jews. And that was really very interesting that it was only one task. So this organization did not have any other task. So that it's how to make the Jews Jewish knowledge in the Lithuanian language better and better. So that it's they have a really very specific context that the Lithuanians have intention to make the Jews more loyal and more integrated, and as well Jews have intention to be Lithuanized. So I don't mention these words, but in the interwar period, we really have this option and with absolutely new trends when the Jews received very big influence of the Lithuanian language and Lithuanian culture, and it's changed local Jews, and it changed somehow as well the Yiddish language on that the Jews spoken. So what was conditions enabling language learning? And exactly after then the Jewish autonomy, Jewish cultural autonomy was stopped in Lithuania, and we have a new idea that the Lithuanian Education Ministry started to care on the Jewish education. And exactly in the 1926, Lithuanian language as a subject became obligatory or compulsory in the all Jewish school. It means that not only the Lithuanian language as such, but as well several subjects in the school was in the all Jewish schools, and it's not only Jewish, but of course all schools of the national minorities was presented in the Lithuanian language. It is Lithuanian language and literature, Lithuanian history, Lithuanian geography, and military services. Yeah, so that it's all subjects who could be useful to the loyalty and who could be useful to the integration aspects was taught and introduced in the schools in the Lithuanian language. The results of the teaching of Lithuanian language comes quite slowly, and the good explanation of these are data about how the children, students of the Jewish schools have passed exams on the Lithuanian language when they try to come to the universities. And we have really very specific situation that more than half of the students, of pretendants to come to the universities don't pass Lithuanian exams. So that it shows that the level of the Lithuanian language in the Jewish schools after several years of establishing obligation to teach Lithuanian language was still really very poor. To change the situation a little bit in the 1933-1934 academical year, it was established and started to work the private Jewish school with the Lithuanian as language of instruction, and it was established in the Kaunas. So you can see that the part of the Jews see such needs and see these integrational part, and even allow to own children go specially to the Jewish school with introductory language with Lithuanian as the introductory language. So that it's one of the options to help to the students know Lithuanian language, not only to the students, but as well to the general Jewish population and Jewish community to start to learn Lithuanian language was the Lithuanian language textbooks. And in quite short period was written more than 30 textbooks dedicated to the different groups of the Jews, for the children, to the adults, to the even the special amateurs, to know specifics of the profession. What is interesting that the first authors who started to write such kind of textbooks was Jews, and then it was mixed groups by the Jews and Lithuanians. So that it became a quite strong idea how to develop the population, and we have really very quickly results, and we can see these results quite quickly in the several years, that all infrastructure was created to learn Lithuanian language to the Jews in the higher level, not only in the everyday simple speech. The Jews started to come to universities, and the Jews started to have a good results and even excellent results in the Lithuanian language, and we can see these quite quickly. So on the slide you see three guys. It's very quite so it's they was friends. I have article on about these about the biographies of these three guys. All of them, with exception Hatzkelis Lemchenas, which one with glasses, you can see on the left corner. So only he was professionally educated in Lithuanian language and studied Lithuanian language as a subject at Vytautas Magnus University in Kaunas or Kauno. Others two, with the mustaches, is Henrikas Zimanas. He became a propagandist during the Soviet Lithuania, and Izidorius Kisinas above. He from the bibliographer of the President Antanas Smetona. Finally, he converted to Christianity and spent Holocaust in the grounds of Vilnius University library. But what these three friends from Vytautas Magnus University do? They was more or less fluent in Lithuanian language. Right? It was only one, so it's really very strong option that joined the efforts of them, and they started to translate different kinds of the Jewish literature to the Lithuanian language. I talk about from the Hebrew and from the Yiddish as well, because Kisinas was really very good in Hebrew, and both and Hatzkelis Lemchenas and Henrikas Zimanas as well knew Hebrew. But they started to translate literature from the Hebrew to Lithuanian language, and from the Lithuanian language to the Hebrew and Yiddish language. So these three guys created all linguistical background to the Jews to understand Lithuanian language and to learn Lithuanian language. So it's quite interesting, and probably you could ask this: why it was necessary to translate Lithuanian, I don't know, poetry, novels to the Hebrew, and it was really very practical reason. Kisinas make this especially to the children who was not able to read these works in the original language. Yeah, so that it was as well a support to the children to study the Lithuanian language and Lithuanian culture, the another language what we know from the school, and Hatkelis Lemchenas and Henrikas Zimanas mostly work on the Yiddish translations, and as you can see, it's the cover of the book published in the 1938. And this is book on the Jewish authors and novels of the Jewish authors translated into Lithuanian language. So it's these three guys produced a big number of the literature that not only allowed to understood Lithuanian language and to learn somehow the specifics of a Lithuanian language, but as well gives the option to the Lithuanians understood the mostly Yiddish culture. What we translate Shalom Aleichem, Ash, and our really very well known Jewish authors to the Lithuanian language as a possibility as well to give to the children read the known novels in the language what we're learning. So that it's very specific way that really very gives from the only few people or at least quite a small group that make a really very big effort in the learning of the Lithuanian literature and culture. So why this translation was really very important and what kind of effect they give for us. What is the most interesting probably for me, that translators adapt religious terminology and enriching the Lithuanian language of words or assigning new meanings of the existing ones. So you could imagine that translation is usually interpretation. So especially it is no exact words. Tradition is different. And these three guys very well understood that they translate Judaism tradition into the Catholic tradition. So, and this explanation was really very needed. That it's quite interesting that via Lithuanian language, the local Jews adopted as well the tradition how to speak about the Jewish item, Judaism, and synagogue equipment using the Lithuanian language, and that it's visible till now in the local Lithuanian Jews speaking tradition. So that it's as well a long-lasting tradition that have continuity from the interwar period. Yiddish or Hebrew words in the translation was quite often modified to Lithuanian to just to look on the names and these people and authors used the Lithuanian names, so it's in the Lithuanian form of the writing. The orthography of the Jewish personal names is adapted as well. So adding Lithuanian suffixes or endings, especially when deforming the female surnames, it became a standard to Lithuania. So if you look on the, for example, lists on the Vilnius University students from the interwar period or Kaunas University students from the interwar period, all of the names and last names are Lithuanized. So and made by the Lithuanian language standard. The Jewish authors started a little bit to play with the Lithuanian language in the self-presentation, and we can find pseudonyms in the different press articles. For example, one author, it was Haimutis. It means Chaim, the normal Jewish name, so it's really very common and really very usual. But the end of this name is how it's written now in English. it's smaller version, yeah, smaller version. So it's of big Haimas, it became a small Haimas, but it's made in the Lithuanian language construction. So eventually, Pesach, as well as the one of a Jewish tradition of one of the fests, begins to represent as Jewish Eastern. So it's instant translations in translations initiated by the Jewish translators. The term Eastern became to refer to the two holidays. So it's the Christians and as well to the Jewish. And till now in the Lithuania, we very strongly work that the term Jewish Eastern, it will be not used. So it's really very deeply rooted till now. Of course, the education makes results, but still it's possible to find, and even in between the Lithuanian Jews, that it's a little bit confusing, but it is a reality. As well, translators reflect both the Lithuanian spoken by local Jews and the Lithuanian being learned by Jewish community. As Jews begin to participate in the translation works, Lithuanian is adapted to the Hebrew and Yiddish, and more or less via versa. So that while traditional terminology of religious terminology proves the greatest challenge in this process. I would like to draw your attention on the intergenerational contrast what we have. I press quite a lot on the schools and the universities, that it's mean that the younger generation, the children who born in Lithuania or was in the, I don't know, school age when the Lithuania state was created, you have absolutely other options and absolutely other opportunities to learn Lithuanian language as the parents of these children. And we have really very specific situation about the understanding of literation. And it is quotation from the Jewish press. I translated it in English, and we can read it together with the small comments, because it's really very symptomatic, and it shows the spreading of a Lithuanian language in the Jewish community and difficulties what comes from the nationalistic view and from the linguistic nationalism in the Lithuania, what we have during the interwar period. And I quote directly from the slide, but please believe me that it's directly from the Jewish press. The younger generation which already speaks Lithuanian, both orally and in writing, and it's really very important. Please remember the catechism for to the conversion of the Jews, that it was really very important to know alphabet, yeah, both orally, so that the children could speak and the children could write in Lithuanian language. So they adopted Latin alphabet. And come back to the quotation, is exempt from conscription until the age of 24, while the older generation mostly doesn't not know Lithuanian, especially in the written form. Yeah, so that it's the older people speak but cannot write. We come back. A competent official reassured our correspondent by saying that the notion of in writing would be interpreted quite liberally, and that the only requirement would be ability to sign one's name in Lithuanian. However, in practice, it is well known that among the older Jewish population, the Latin alphabet is generally unfamiliar, and many are unable to sign their names in Lithuanian at all. If a requirement is for voters must know how to write, then it should apply equally to everyone in their own language. After all, the aim there is not to promote the state language per se, but rather to ensure that the voters are reasonably educated. It is not possible to be educated with the help of another language, even if one knows only minimal Lithuanian. So that it's you can see that the knowing of the writing in the Lithuanian language became a problem, and authorities sometimes even some problems to write something, in that case only own name and last name in Lithuanian understood as alliteration of the people. Yeah, so and the Jews started to Jews really very raise up the problem that they are alliterated, so they are educated. They are quite good educated, but in our language, and and the Lithuanian language is not only one. Via which it could be people educated. That it's really very interesting option, and finally, more or less, it was not resolved. So it's the people need to know how to write own names in the Lithuanian language. So what is the result of the Lithuanization? And a little bit I go and sum up. As well, I would like to ask you to look on the screen and to look on the illustration. You can see one really very interesting and phenomenal thing. It is Jewish newspapers in Lithuanian language. It is not unique in the Central Europe. In Poland as well, it was the Jewish press in the Polish language and so on. But so we have as well the same in the Lithuanian language. It is Apžvalga, review. It's the second one. We have two Jewish newspapers like that. The first was Our Voice, Mūsų garsas was not so successful. He was printed only 2 years in the beginning of the 1923, and it was no readers, and it was closed. This one, Apžvalga or Review, started to print in the 1935, and in the June 16, what it's mean, I even today during the preparation calculate that we have in this year we have the anniversary, so it's the 90 years of the Apžvalga, of the long continuity Jewish press in Lithuanian language in Lithuania. So that it's quite interesting, but it's the second biggest Jewish newspaper in the Lithuania. It was published in the context of the Yiddish Stimme that was the most popular, and the tirage of Yiddish Stimme was approximately 5,000. So Apžvalga have 3,000 copies twice a week. So that it's a big audience if you look on the traditions of the culture of reading newspapers, and especially such the Jewish newspaper in the Lithuanian language. Quite interesting who was the publisher and who was the supporter of this newspaper, and it's as well one organization who tried to support the Lithuanian-speaking Jews and who tried to more strongly introduce Lithuanian language and Lithuanian culture in the Jewish environment, and it is the organization as well, not profit organization, with the title Union of the Jewish Soldiers who fought in the Lithuanians' War of Independence. That it's one of the most important things that the Jews really support, even the military services, the independence of Lithuania. And it's really very make a big impression to the Lithuanians and have a big efforts to the contacts between the Lithuanians and Jews. So the Apžvalga or review is really very important because the publishers, the creators of the content, and probably the readers was by the Jewish origin. Of course, Apžvalga was used to present to the Lithuanians as well some the Jewish problems in the Lithuanian language, but more or less, I am not strongly support the ideas that it was only propagandic newspaper, but it shows as well such a cultural changes in the societies. This newspaper that was read and created by Jews probably could have a quite long continuation, but during the first Soviet occupation in 1940, it was nationalized by Soviets and the stopped activity. So that it was the same attitude to the others Jewish newspapers, and not only the Jewish, but the idea of the Jewish press in the Lithuanian language is really very strong, and suggest the more or less big changes in the Lithuanian society. I would like to as well go to one quotation, and this quotation comes from the one traveler, Antanas Poška. You can see him in the screen as well. He traveled usually by motorbike, and he makes several times trips to the Palestine, to India, and to our long destination countries. And he visited a lot of immigrant Jews in Palestine, and left the memoirs. In the several parts of his memoirs, he described the connections and communication with the local Jews. I only Palestine Jews, yeah. So I only present one, but it's really very impressive how the interwar period and how the Lithuanian language changed the local Jewish community, and how these attitudes to the Lithuanian language was moved to the other context, exactly to the Palestine. And please read together. And I quote, "We cannot truly observe how Lithuanized the Lithuanian Jews are while they live in Lithuania. But now, encountering Lithuanian Jews in Palestine, that Lithuanian characters became very evident. The Lithuanian Jews in Palestine hardly seems like a Jews at all. They resemble Lithuanians more, and meeting them feels like encountering an old acquaintance or a relative." Yes, you can see how the Lithuanian language connected the people, and gives new mentality in the attitudes. And I go to the final stage of the probably assimilation and involvement in the Lithuanian culture, and mostly in the Lithuanian language. And I would like to ask you as well to look on the screen. You can see in the photo Alexandras Stromas. He's philosopher who grew up was adopted child by first secretary of a Lithuanian Communist Party. His father was killed in the Lietūkio garages in the one anti-Semitic killing in the beginning of the in the beginning of the Nazi occupation in Lithuania. And I especially write in the screen what kind of last name he used. Yeah, so still he changed a little bit writing. He was Stromas. Yeah, so that he used the Lithuanian version of own name. And he Alexandras Stromas was the cousin of Irena Veisaitė. And Irena Veisaitė is really very known the person, really very Lithuanized Jew. They both are children survived the Holocaust, and so it's the connection of these two cousins is really very interesting, because they became as bridges between the Lithuanian and Jewish cultures. And Alexandras Stromas was really very strong dissident against the Soviet regime, and nevertheless the adopted father, he was allowed to go out of the Soviet Union, and he was the first philosopher who made prognosis that the Soviet Union finally collapsed. And in their own memoirs and their own thinking, he usually, especially in the beginning of the contemporary independent Lithuania, he raised a question why the Lithuanians discussing the options for the Jews to feel as Lithuanians, and why the Lithuanians questions the belongings of Jews to the Lithuania state. And please look how, and really very good example, how the Lithuanization and Lithuanian language, Lithuanian culture change the people. And of course is case of assimilated Jew, but still it's the direction In that goes all Jewish community and together the Lithuanian state. And right now as well quote from the Alexander Stroma's letters. Is a person not Lithuanian if both his parents were citizens of independent Lithuania? He's talking about the interwar period. If he was born and reside in Lithuania and his native language and native culture were and will always remain Lithuanian. So you can see the Jew who really very strongly localize yourself in the Lithuanian environment, and even questioning the position of Lithuanians do not allow for the Jews to be Lithuanians. And right now I will absolutely go to the conclusions and what it means and how the Jews learned the Lithuanian language and what it means generally to the society. First, probably visible conclusions, and I draw attention on these several times, that the Lithuanization and learning of Lithuanian language, it was not easy to the Jewish population. And it was differently manifested in the different generations and or across different generations of the Jews, and really very difficult to find the unified features of the learning of the Lithuanian language. The most Jews of school age in the interwar Lithuania acquired the Lithuanian language. However, many of them did not use this language at home or in the private communication or instead revealing to our linguistic context. So we have a really very such situation that the child come back from the school to the parents, and the parents cannot normally communicate in the Lithuanian language. So it's mostly the children, Jewish children of the interwar period really grow up in the multilingual perspective and in the multilingual environment. It's one option if a parent speak Yiddish, but it could be another option that the neighbors speak Yiddish and the parents speak Russian language as well. We could have different models of these linguistic contexts. The knowledge of the Lithuanians among the Jews, we could probably not indirectly compare with the Hebrew language on that time, because as well the Hebrew language was, especially the modern Hebrew language, began taught in the schools, and many parents do not speak Hebrew as fluently or as the speaking language what the children mastered to do. As well, the interwar Lithuania forms of speaking and writing about the Jews in the Lithuanian language began to develop, and this is absolutely new situation, including the specific tradition or form the personal names or surnames. And as I told already, it's visible till now in the Jewish community in Lithuania. For the Jews really who spoke Lithuanian but did not attend Lithuanian schools, the writing in the Latin script proved to be one of the more challenging aspects of the language use. Yeah, for today, for us, especially for the English speaker Jews, it's really very difficult probably to understood. But the Hebrew characters, Hebrew letters is what first what the children know, Jewish children know in the interwar Lithuania, and then the Latin alphabet was the second one that they needed to learn. And I would like to as well draw attention on the interaction between the languages, that Lithuanian language as well really very strongly influenced local Yiddish dialect. As you know, that the Lithuanian Jews have a separate special dialect, so it's so-called Litvish. And you can see in the photo in the screen Professor Hatzkelis Lemchenas as well. Please look Hatzkelis Lemchenas. It's the name how he introduce yourself, and he's the linguist who researched the phenomenon on the interaction of the languages. And you can see this book in the slide, but I can show you. It's not so good, yeah. As I can show you exactly in the screen. So it's small book. What's interesting, printed in the 1970s as a dissertation of Hatzkelis Lemchenas. And it was during the Soviet times, but it's a little bit strange when the new context on the anti-Semitism in the Soviet Union. But still, this book is based on the Hatzkelis Lemchenas knowledge from the interwar Lithuania. So it's and he find plenty of Lithuanian words in the different spheres of the Jewish life that was introduced to the Yiddish language and normally used in the Yiddish language. The linguistic interaction between Jews and Lithuanians could have evolved in the directions unknown to us today, that are not being interrupted by the two major forces. The first one force is the large scale of emigration of the Jews, and the children born in emigration place, or the children who was bring to emigration in the small age, not needed the Lithuanian language, so that it's have not continuation in the families. And of course, one really big catastrophe, local catastrophe, is the wasting tragedy of the Holocaust that stopped the life of a community and stopped more or less using in the bigger scale the Lithuanian language between the Lithuanian Jews. Fluency in the Lithuanian language, and it is shown in the researches, was often a significant factor in determining of one of the chances of better surviving during the Holocaust. So that it's the situation what happened during the interwar Lithuania, and the languages interruption, and even the learning of the Lithuanian language became one of the options for the people to survive, to have a better connections to the rescues who help them to survive in the Holocaust. Thank you very much, and I'm ready to your questions. If we have, yeah, I stopped my presentation. Okay. And go to the chat.
All right, thank you so much, Virgita. If anyone has questions for Professor Verbitskina, please put them in the Q&A section of the Zoom. And while we wait for those, I have a couple of questions that might be interesting. Thank you. This was a really fascinating lecture, and it sort of helps to frame this idea of how a new state attempts to absorb and acculturate a minority population that speaks a different language. And, as you said, they first gave them the possibility of cultural autonomy, which of course is very generous. A lot of states didn't do this, didn't provide this for any minorities, but then they revoked it in 1925. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that. What prompted them the government to revoke cultural autonomy and institute, obligatory Lithuanian lessons?
Yeah, so it's thank you for the question. It's really very not so a lot discussed question in general in the historiography. And Lithuanian government, in my understanding, make a clever decision. They do not somehow stopped. It's not any law that stopped the existence of the autonomy. They just stopped the financial support. And it's moved to the other Jewish institutions. So it's more or less all of Jewish institutions existed, the rabbinates, the kahals, and so on. So that it's that the system in the religious level was not interrupted. But the government understood that autonomy and the ruling of the school by the Jewish autonomy do not give a possibility for the Jews to be integrated. And one of them, or probably only one, the strong reason is it was the integration. It was the integration and of Jews, and of course, probably there's some examples of other countries, because the other countries who don't have autonomy was more successful in that. So, and if we look pragmatically from the contemporary situation, the Lithuania lost approximately 7 years to make this Jewish integration more quick and more successful. So it's there are researchers who's really very happy and really very high to evaluate the idea of the autonomy in that case. But if we look from other state interest and some Jewish communities organization interest, so it's the stopping of autonomy was a quite a good thing, because the autonomy do not have a very specific spheres of ruling of the Jewish community. So it's the Jewish community was as well the secular and go secular, more and more secular. So, and we don't need to have such a big structure.
Right, right. And in connection to that, I mean, you did mention, I think, that the Jews were the largest national minority in Lithuania, but there were others as well who underwent the process of Lithuanianization, and I'm wondering how the other minorities handled it. You spoke a bit about how the Jews had difficulties in some cases with Lithuanianization. What about, Poles or other minorities that might, how do they handle it?
Uh, yeah, so it's really a very interesting question, because it's important to compare. But from our side, it's not difficult to compare, because with communities was these other national minorities was relatively small. So for example, it was approximately 4,000 Belarusians.
Huh.
And of course, to be 4,000 Belarusians, and still right now in Vilnius we have a Belarusian language school. So it's we have such tradition that continued, but so it's then it's 200,000. It's not the same as 4,000. Then we look on the Russians. That is as well really very interesting. Lithuania have a own Russian community that is so-called Old Believers. So it's not Orthodox Russian, but it's Old Believers, and they usually was bilingual. So it was Russian and Lithuanian speakers. That is, so it was no problem. They goes to the Lithuanian schools. It was no problem. As well, they have the same tradition that the Jews quite early started to go to the Lithuanian schools, because not in all shtetl was enough children to have a separate Jewish school. And that's as well one kind of Lithuanization. So it was no Jewish school. It was no option to bring, because the logistic was different, and it was no option to bring children to the next city or to our school. And children goes to the Lithuanian school. If you talk about the Poles, the situation is most complicated, because the Lithuania do not have generally good relations with the Poles during the interwar period, and there the main question was the Vilnius case. Because the Poles was in Vilnius, Lithuanians have a really very strong attitude and idea that we do not stop without the Vilnius, and Vilnius is our historical capital. And even it's strange, yeah, so that it's Vilnius and Kaunas that became the temporary capital of Lithuania. It's only 100 kilometers. And we know that the Vilnius is the capital of Yiddish, and Kaunas became a capital of Hebrew. So that is as well really very, very interesting, because as I try to explain as well, that the people spoke at home Yiddish, but children learn Hebrew and Lithuanian language in the schools. So that it's really very, very specific situation. With the Poles, it was quite difficult. It was several private Polish schools, but as well the community was not so big. And the Lithuania generally not so very care on the Polish population, it's connected with the bad, it's more or less no diplomatical relation between Poland and Lithuania during the interwar period. So the Jewish community in Lithuania understood as the big support to the state, and they have big interest in this community as well.
Right.
And we have a question, even 3 questions, and I start from the. Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I can read the questions to you.
Yeah. Okay. I see as well.
Okay, so I'm just going to start with the middle one. Has the opposite path of Lithuanians beginning to learn Yiddish between the wars been discussed or explored in the historiography? And could you reflect on this, how this could have happened? So, you did mention that there were some Lithuanians who did learn Yiddish, obviously as a result of employment or occupational issues. But were there Lithuanians who actually, formally learned Yiddish?
More or less, it was, if I know, it was no option, I don't know, to go to school or to university to learn Yiddish. But if you look on the Kaunas University, in Kaunas University was the Hebrew department. So as well, so it's not Yiddish, but Hebrew department. So it depends on the local context. Of course, it was probably options to learn from in the childhood from the playing in the yard. So it's really from the really very easy everyday interaction. But I tell one story that it's really very impressive for me, and that probably could explain the real situation. Even 2 stories. It's not research in the historiography, so just I more know from the fact that it comes just rapidly, so it's without any systematization. So Borisas Dauguvietis, the theater producer, theater director, he knows Yiddish because quite a lot of music orchestra and actors was by Jewish origin. So that the people comes to and he need to explain roles and I don't know, idea of a theater in the most understandable way to the actors, for example. Yeah, so the professional reason to learn Yiddish was quite strong. But we can go to the smaller people in the more general situation. For me, it's usually impressive, and then sometimes I mentioned this. Usually mention this example. Nearby Merkine, we have the Daksnes village. This village is dedicated to and it's agricultural village of the Jewish farmers. But it's from beginning strange and not usual. Yeah, so in the 19th century, the Jews don't have it was so poor and they don't have just meal, and asked for the Russian Empire government to give a burden to the agriculture. And because the Russian tried to make the Jews similar to the other groups of inhabitants, they agreed to give this land to the agriculture, and the Jews started to agricultural life. They was not so very successful. They found a lot of different businesses and activities, but it happened fire in the nearby village of the Lithuanians, and the Jewish farmers go to these Lithuanians and bring Lithuanians to own houses to give a place to live to the people that was usually who works in the fields. And till now, there are few ladies in this Daksne village who remember how the Jews comes to these fire-demolished houses of the Lithuanians, and these ladies remember that the parents spoke Yiddish with the Jews. Not the Jews spoke the Lithuanian, but the parents spoke Yiddish. So it was the farmers, it was the peasants, but they spoke Yiddish. This story, so it's to make a long story short, the story is really very specifically ended, and in these villages, really very interesting and really very sensitive attitude to the Jewish heritage, because the Lithuanians still live and still left in the same houses in which the Jews bring them after a fire. So the Lithuanian stays in the same houses after the Holocaust. and they have really very specific attitude to this. So it's a really very good question. I don't know exactly how to answer. Yeah, it's absolutely undiscussed. But we know that even the communist groups in the beginning of the first Soviet occupation, some Lithuanians as well communicated with the Jews in the Yiddish language. So it's Yiddish language somehow functioning and at quite good level between the quite educated people. Yeah, and it's really very good topic to research. So that it's really very interesting.
Okay. We have two other questions, both dealing with generational issues. One asks if since younger Jews probably spoke Lithuanian best, were they the ones most likely to survive the Holocaust? And then also, many of the older Jews had difficulty with the Latin alphabet. Were they more familiar with Cyrillic from the Russification period? Or, you could add on, were they just simply more familiar with the Hebrew alphabet?
Yeah, so it's I go to the second one. I start from the second one question. Yeah, so but please understood me correctly. Don't knowing the Latin alphabet, I don't understood as alliteration. So just yeah, but people know Russian alphabet, so it's mean Cyrillic, but it's not the same as the Latin. So and the Latin alphabet, it was still, and Lithuanian language is with the Latin alphabet, and that it was still the problem to the local Jews. So I don't like to tell so that they are not able, but probably just we can look on their own life. So how many times we have to learn foreign language? So just we have own routine. We go to the work, we care to the children, we care to the parents. I don't know, to the dogs and cats. So we do a lot of different things, and the learning is usually and language usually need systematic learning. So it's not, you cannot come and using of the language as well in the writing. And yeah, so it's the people know the Cyrillic, but the Lithuanian language alphabet is Latin, and it was the problem. If you come to the possibilities to survive, yeah. So we have in Lithuania. So generally, it's a general trend, but it was easier, if it is possible, to tell to help to the children, to the Jewish children, and it's plenty of the stories when the Jewish children became in the villages became the cousins from the cities, or relatives from the cities who comes because it's no meal in the cities and so on. And when the children talked without any accent in Lithuanian language, it was really very helpful to the family, and it was more comfortable to the child. Because it could spend time in the yard, could go around. Sometimes even in the schools, they go general in the Lithuanian schools with the falsified documents. But there are as well very interesting stories that the Yiddish comes back in really very crazy situations, and sometimes the children use word, I don't know, candy or something like that in the Yiddish, and shows that they are not real Lithuanian. So that is, we have really quite a lot of interesting stories that one word allowed to understood the child it's Jewish. Even he was grow up in the Lithuanian family, even he was so it's more or less educated, even sometimes Christianized, but somehow the Yiddish was deeply in the mind and comes sometimes in the very specific periods, usually as well to the adults, as the better knowledge of Lithuanian language was as well quite helpful. So when we talk about the rescue of the Jews, we have a lot of different criteria who was probably helpful. It's even anthropological view could be helpful. Color of the hairs or color of the eyes, it could be as well helpful. So language, it's one of the most important, but we need to look in the complexity of a different, and of course the general accident and general situation, how this saving act happened. And usually what is important that we have the saving networks. Usually one Jew was saved by the, I don't know, 10, 20 or something like that, families or persons. It's rather cases than one Lithuanian family saved one Jew, so that Jews needed to travel to change the places because generally it's depend on the neighbors usually. Yeah, so that it's to have a safe. Yeah. Thank you for the questions also. It's really very interesting. Yeah. And even it gives some ideas to the deeper understanding of the process. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's all the questions we have, and we're out of time. But I'd like to thank you so much. Thanks. Please join me in thanking Professor Jurgita Verbitskiena, who has been the recipient of the 2024-2025 Fellowship in Baltic Studies at the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research. If you like what you heard and learned something, please consider making a donation to YIVO. We can't bring you these lectures without your support. So once again, thanks for joining us, and please join us next week when we have 2 other fellowship lectures presented.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and have a nice day today. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.